I'm Tiffany. Welcome to Towering TBR. If you're new, I'm chronically ill and disabled. I read a wide variety of books, and today I'm going to talk about the 5 nonfiction books that were the best I read all year. I read a total of 16 nonfiction books this year, which is much lower than normal. The 5 I want to talk about are amazing. I will be starting at number 5 and going up to my number 1 favorite. And I have talked about many of these books before, either in single book reviews or in monthly wrap-ups. And so I will be linking any videos in the cards and in the description in case you want more details on a book. At number 5, the first book I read in 2024, Against Technoableism by Ashley Shew, is my number 5 pick. This was a stellar way to kick off my reading. Ashley Shew is a disability activist, and in her book of essays, she talks a lot about ableism in our society and specific incidences that she has faced as a person with multiple chronic illnesses, and she's also an amputee and has chemo brain. She specifically talks a lot about how media likes to reinforce ableist ideas. She also talks about how people expect disabled people to be broken and that they can be fixed with technology. She gave the example of herself as she is an amputee. One of her legs is amputated at the knee, and so many people tried to push her into using a prosthetic to try and be as minimally disabled as possible rather than using a wheelchair. But something that a lot of people didn't think about or realize is that using a prosthesis is A, expensive, B, it can be very uncomfortable and cause sores, and 3, it can be really exhausting to try and use that. And that for her specifically, using a wheelchair actually gave her more freedom because she had then more energy to be out and about. And the problem with people wanting to be as little disabled as possible is because they don't expect society to change and adapt. Obviously, if you have stairs, using a prosthesis is much easier to work with than if you are in a wheelchair and lots of places are not accessible. She very much talked about wanting a society that really includes and accommodates people. So she was expected to be as non-disabled as possible so that society didn't have to change and become accessible to her. But she talks about how accommodations help everyone, and she brought up the specific act of subtitles. Subtitles were originally created for deaf and hard of hearing people for shows and movies to know what was going on in the show. But there are so many people who use subtitles now that are not just deaf or hard of hearing, and how that by creating that accommodation, it helps everybody, not just disabled people. She also helped me confront some of my own ableist ideas, specifically that productivity should not be a measure of your worth. That's a really outdated idea all the way back from slavery. That's really, really part of the bedrock of capitalism. She ends her essay with this quote: "Eventually, everyone becomes disabled if they live long enough. Like death and taxes, aging is inevitable. We should always be planning with disability in mind because disability is an inherent part of having squishy meat bodies. The future is disabled. This is especially true in the era of COVID, which is disabling young people in record numbers with the various impacts of long COVID. The disabled future is coming to pass now, and we need to create an inclusive and accessible environment for all kinds and ages of disabled people to deal with it." This essay collection contained so many insightful thoughts. What a way to start off the year. At number 4, we've got Mouse by Art Spiegelman. This is a 2-volume graphic memoir of Art Spiegelman's father's time as a Jew in Nazi Germany. Art draws the Jews and other persecuted people as mice, and he draws the Nazis as cats. In the first volume, we see a lot of the buildup, and we see people losing their rights and people being rounded up into ghettos. And fortunately for Art Spiegelman, his father's family was quite wealthy, and they were able to shield some of the effects in the beginning, basically using their money to to bribe people to look the other way. It is impossible to not see the similarities in today's political climate, and this is an incredibly important book. In Volume 2, we see Art's father, Vladek, as he is taken to a concentration camp. No longer does his money protect him. He is sent and forced to do labor and loses contacts with friends and families, and it is incredibly heartbreaking to read. This is a frequently banned book, and I think in today's climate, we should definitely be prioritizing reading like firsthand accounts of the Holocaust, especially since there are people out there who deny that it ever happened. Haunting and powerful, definitely recommend. At number 3, I picked up Challenger by Adam Higginbotham. This is a narrative nonfiction all about the 1986 explosion of the Challenger. After we made it to the moon, funding was cut to NASA, and they started making a lot of mistakes and near misses, preferring to prioritize capitalism over people's safety. We see a number of incidences that result in the loss of human life. Around the halfway point, we start learning about the astronauts who are going to die in the Challenger explosion. One of those is teacher Krista McAuliffe, who was chosen as basically a PR stunt to try and get people more interested in the space program. Not just people, but kids especially. We get to know them, and as time is counting down, we see red flag after red flag. All of these safety issues that are flagged and said, hey, we need to fix this, or hey, we need to get more information on this. This is not working as expected. There were several people at NASA and at the rocket company who spoke out and said, please, we have to push the shuttle off. This is not safe. But the space shuttle had already been scrubbed 7 times, and they didn't want to make it 8. So against the advice of the engineers and the scientists, the head of NASA decided to move forward. I felt helpless knowing the future outcome, knowing that the shuttle was going to explode and these people were going to die. And I felt helpless, just wanting to scream at them, stop prioritizing money over people's lives. At number 2, I have placed Disability Intimacy, edited by Alice Wong. This is a beautiful collection of essays talking about a variety of different disabilities and different types of intimacy. I said in my mid-year book tag for you out that this was my favorite book of the year so far, and as you see that it's in second place, there is something that beat it out, but this collection of essays was great. Anytime you have a collection of different authors, you're probably not going to like all of them, but this, and that's true, I didn't like all of these essays, but this is a very strong collection, and I felt like I learned a ton. The collection includes essays as well as interviews, poetry, and photojournalism. The types of disabilities and intimacies are also quite varied. We have one who talks about her entry into sex work when she was no longer able to hold a 9-to-5 job. Sex work has very flexible hours, but unfortunately, sex workers face a stigma, and disabled sex workers face an additional stigma. She talks about how many people insinuated she was not attractive enough to work as a sex worker, and that in relationships that she wasn't worthy of being loved sexually or romantically or any of that, which is just heartbreaking to read. Another person talks about their close bond with their service animal and how she has joy from the companionship, and it helped her rediscover her self-worth. That was an absolutely beautiful essay. There were discussions about how nudity isn't always about intimacy, and that some disabled people are forced into situations where they have to trust their carers with their body. The depictions of chronic pain were incredibly realistic. There were also talks about eugenics and medically assisted death. I loved this so much, and I love this even more than the first collection, Disability Visibility, which I also highly recommend. Cannot recommend this enough. Absolutely excellent. And lastly, at number 1, How to Say Babylon by Sophia Sinclair. This is a beautifully written memoir written by Sophia Sinclair, who is a poet. She grew up in the extremely controlling cult of Rastafari in Jamaica. Before this book, I didn't know much about Rastafari. I knew that they liked the stereotypes. Like they like reggae, they wear their hair in dreads, they smoke pot, that's kind of all I knew about it. Her father is incredibly controlling, and by age 8, she is told that she must wear her hair in dreadlocks as a sign of her faith. She is bullied a lot at school because of this. The premise of Rastafari is that they are the chosen people, and that God is on their side, and that white people and Western civilization, which they call Babylon, are just out to get the Rastafari people. They're out to put the black man down, and we see her father blaming Babylon whenever things don't go his way. He is a godhead, and he is the head of the household and can make all decisions, not only for himself, but for his wife and for his children as well. He has ultimate power, and what he says is law. Sophia does not believe in this religion, and when she starts to rebel, he comes down like a hammer, trying to control her with extreme physical violence. She doesn't want to be Rastafari, and ultimately plans her escape not only from Rastafari, but Jamaica too. And it's poetry that saves her. It's poetry that gives her a way out. I highly recommend you listen to the audiobook because she reads it herself, and her Jamaican patois just really adds to the atmosphere of this book. I think that that's why it's number one. It sneaked past because I keep thinking about it. Her writing is gorgeous. So there you have it, the 5 best nonfiction books I read this year. What is your favorite nonfiction book? And have you read any of the ones I talked about? Let's have a chat down in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me.